So welcome to It's Not All About the Numbers podcast, the leadership podcast that doesn't just focus on the bottom line. My name is Chris and that is Mike.
Hi, everyone.
And this week, our co-host is Becky Glover, award-winning SME finance director, and more importantly, a English wine entrepreneur, which I'm sure we'll get into. First of all, if you do like what's happening on It's Not All About the Numbers, then do subscribe, do click 5 stars. Our audience is growing every week. And obviously seeing the numbers go up every week is really, really motivating. So first things first, how's everybody's week been?
Well, it's difficult to think back past what I've been doing today. So I'm sat in the Trade Union Congress building in London after being on a panel this morning for the Pay Stonework Restoration All Staff Offsite, would you believe?
Sorry, say that again?
Exactly.
Sorry.
The Pay Stonework and Restoration All Staff Offsite. So one of my mates from university works for a stone restoration company, and he invited me along to come along and talk about sustainability and net zero, which I'm phenomenally underqualified to talk about. But it ended up being a conversation about data and data sharing, so I was quite happy in that space. So that's been this morning. So
I'm
can't
picturing
really...
a load of very hard men with large hands. I don't know why. Is that what you found?
I mean, your instincts aren't massively off, but I did spend the lunchtime chatting to the head of their federation, who's a lady who's been doing it since 1987. And we had a lot of conversations about when she started in 1987. It literally was, as you just described, and we were talking about the changes over time and how it's got less male dominated and less chauvinistic, I think is probably fair to say. So it's been really interesting. It's been a really interesting day so far. And then the only other thing that pops into my head, and this is more of my kind of social renewal thing, is I mentioned last week I was going to see Depeche Mode. Monday was seeing Depeche Mode, and it was as amazing as I hoped. So I enjoyed that, and I'm still on the buzz from being there. And I know you're going on Saturday, Chris, so you've got a lot to look forward to. Yes.
And to clarify, when you say on the buzz, you just mean, a natural high there, which is all good.
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely.
100% legal and everything, yeah.
Well, Becky, I don't know how you're going to follow that. We've got stonemasons, men with big hands, and Depeche Mode concerts buzzing.
Yeah.
How was your week?
Well, I mean, very boring compared to that. I've only seen people with normal sized hands. And it just hasn't been anything compared to that, to be honest. So, my week's been good. I mean, it's not been that good, but it's, filled with the usual, really. Year-end appraisals. Actually, this week I did do a little bit of networking, which was wonderful because myself and the partner of a solicitor firm went to a classical music concert. So I feel like my culture levels have gone through the roof. So that was a wonderful way to spend a Wednesday evening. And then, completely randomly yesterday, I decided I was going to go and get some acupuncture, which I've never done before. And actually, I also had, you see those sports people having like bruises on their back, like circular bruises, cupping it's called. I also had a little bit of that too, just, going through all these new things this week. So, and then just walking the dogs. You were quite a week, walking the dogs. It's beautiful here today. I don't know about you guys. We've got like not a cloud in the sky.
I think you might have trumped Mike there.
I think, come on.
Definitely. I mean, I've not seen the sky since 7:30 this morning, so I'm hoping it's sunny outside. And after this, I'm going outside.
Yeah, amazing. I'd love to get a massage. Actually, I need to book that in. Note to self. But sounds like a good week. My week. I think I had the dullest week. To be fair, I think on the family side, we've started badminton.
Oh, I love badminton.
And it's good, isn't it? It's really good.
Yeah,
you can
really competitive.
whatever age, you can hit it as hard as you want and still return it.
We were talking just before we started, Becky, Chris and I, about the Fast show going on tour, and you just made me think, Chris, are you competitive dad? Are you there smashing the shot clock? Yeah, is that you?
Yeah, I beat my kids 11-0 every time.
Yeah,
No,
excellent.
I'm not. I'm a very generous dad because otherwise all hell breaks loose. But no, we started that. That was fun. I actually found out I'm a rugby fan, and I asked my kids what they wanted to do sports wise because they've hit a bit of a transition year in school where they're moving up into secondary school, and I asked this open question about what they wanted to do, and it was actually my daughter wants to play rugby, which has
Love
blown
it.
me away. And I'm because I never saw it coming. She's very crafty and quite quiet and likes to keep herself to herself, but she turned around to me and just said, "Yeah, I want to start playing rugby, Dad." That's fantastic. But we kept it was the power of the open question because we kept on asking, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Do you want to do, more craft? Do you want to do this because your friend does it? And then we just sort of said, well, okay, open question. What do you want to do? And she walked us through her thinking and then said rugby. I was like, wow, I would never have guessed. So that was fantastic. On the work side, we ran our first mastermind of the year and our first talks, Gen Z Talks, which is a sort of a webinar series that we do. That was fantastic. And I'm mentioning that because Mike didn't, because Mike was part of our mastermind. So what happened this week? Now, we're going to stop talking about this after this week, but we are definitely going to talk about this just one more time. And it is the post office, because it is a bit of a gift that keeps on giving. Becky, we spoke beforehand, and I'd actually seen this as well in the news, which I found quite interesting, around the decision to sack the forensic accountants when they started to highlight that there were problems with their IT system.
Well, I think it's ridiculous in short, because why bring in an external expert and a group of people that know what they're doing to go off and find something that could potentially be wrong or not, but at least they're there and at least they're independent, to then really have them come back and say, oh yeah, oh that's not so good and that's not so good, to then turn around and go, yeah, do you know what, I think we should deal with this in-house now. Like, sorry, it just seems completely ridiculous, because you've obviously had the thought process to say, right, this is what needs to happen. It needs to be independent, it needs to be external, it needs to be a specialist. And then when things aren't going quite as well as you'd hoped, you go, oh, well, actually, no, let's not do that anymore. I think it's crazy. And I think it kind of highlights the whole sort of theme of this post office scandal, which is, cover-ups. And if you don't like it, then let's just put our fingers in our ears.
Yeah.
I think what's really missing is the actual human aspect of it all. They didn't say, oh my gosh, these people have found something brilliant, because now we can deal with it. And then we can, help all of those people that might be affected by it.
Mike, you look perplexed.
No, I was just thinking how to say something different to Becky and what we've said before, because I think I 100% agree. It's that people element. I think the thing that's really interesting and actually you said it there, Becky. So just to touch on something you said, which is, why did they invite these people in if they weren't going to actually listen to what they said? And I think they almost invited them in to give them a clean bill of health. And once they realised they weren't going to get a clean bill of health, let's get shot of them because we need to manage this catastrophe, inverted commas, ourselves. So I think it's almost that's something we've touched on before when talking about this, and many people have touched on. It was all about managing the brand and managing the reputation of the company, not thinking about the human impacts and the people impacts of the mistakes and the issues that were happening. And this is the unredacted document that's come out today, where there are government ministers and people representing the UK government involved in some of the decision making around this. It's going to, well, you say we're not going to talk about it again after today, Chris. You never know. You never know what's the next thing to come out.
It's interesting because I think it's nice in a way that the accountants here have done the right thing. They've sort of presented the right information, and they've been asked to leave. In a lot of times an audit, they're kind of complicit in this as much as the government were, and they kind of agree to manage the message in a particular way. And it looks like the accountants here have actually done the right thing, which is great. If not sometimes different to what happens in the audit world. controversial. But I was quite interested in the fact that they called it Project Sparrow as well.
That's someone trying to, I mean, you know, you get a piece of paper and it says Project Sparrow. All of a sudden you're like, oh, cute, lovely, this lovely little garden bird that jumps around. If you got the same piece of paper that said like, you know, Project Wolf or something, you'd have a different mindset reading the papers. So maybe it's some sort of subliminal thing they're trying to,
it smacks of being just being completely ridiculous, right? Why on earth would an organisation call something like it feels like they want to be secret agents?
Well, I was going to say, wasn't there that book Red Sparrow, which I think was all about espionage and sex and how they kind of, you know, married those two worlds together to get what they wanted. I'm not suggesting that anything like that went on here.
It sounded like you were trying to come up with a controversial title for this podcast when you put it onto the platform. I think you've
Post
done
office sexpionage.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. Algorithms, take that. Sexpionage. Anyway, yeah, I've spoken about that enough. But it's, you know, look, it is a gift that keeps on giving. And as we just said, it seems like a crazy decision to ask for expertise and then to ignore it. But you know, having been involved in fraud, I also can see how, and forensic work, I can also see how people recoil from the truth. And this is the case in a lot of corporate fraud. It never goes reported and it gets prosecuted because people are just too embarrassed. They don't want the PR headlines. Unfortunately, the behavior is very common. Becky, you mentioned there, actually, I used to be an auditor because now you're in business and entrepreneurship, which is great. So what's keeping you busy?
Yeah, so as I said, I was an auditor and I was in practice for about 5 years, which I have to say wasn't my most enjoyable 5 years. No offense to the people that are in practice, it just wasn't really for me. So yeah, like when I qualified and moved into industry and into business, it was much more my thing, because I always think of accounting and finance as two separate worlds almost. There's the accountants that deal with like IFRS and reporting and statutory stuff, and then there's finance people that are, you know, more into running businesses and creating, you know, shareholder wealth at the end of the day. So yeah, I currently work for an insurance broker and underwriting firm as their finance director. And before that, I've worked in startup tech companies and, as you said, founded my own business as well. So really, for me, I think it's all about making businesses better, making them work better, getting better productivity, growing the business at the end of the day is what it's all about. But I'm all about using technology and data to enable that growth and that improvement.
It sounds like you've been on a bit of a journey there, and I don't like to bash auditors too much. No, that's a lie, actually. I think they should be carved out from our whole industry and dealt with in a different way. But was there why did you move from one to the other? Because you're now part of our club, which is great.
I always knew I was going to move out of practice. So I really kind of used practice to get my qualification, and to get some good experience and like exposure to lots of different companies. So I used to audit charities, academies, as well as big, you know, manufacturing companies, some bigger brands that people would probably know. But I always knew that's not what I wanted to do, just because you're sort of dropped into a company. You have, you know, however long, 2 weeks at that company with that sort of group of people that you're auditing with, and then you're picked up and dropped in another company. So it was great exposure because you met lots of different people that generally all hated you. So that gives you a nice thick skin. You see a lot of systems, you learn a lot of ways how not to do things. But yeah, I kind of just used that process at a stage of my life to get what I needed to then move into business, which is where I always knew I wanted to be. But you're right, it is a journey. Like I started in business and I was just kind of doing what I was doing. But then I kind of found tech as a way of running my own business alongside working. because there are only so many hours in the day. And if you can automate things and streamline things and get it to work for you, whilst you're working on other things, more value add things, then it's always a good thing to implement. And it kind of just spiraled from there. Found you guys, and never looked back.
And when you say you guys, you mean the podcast or
podcast, the community, the events, everything. Gen CFO. Yeah.
So can I just ask a question, which is, so you've mentioned qualification a couple of times. What qualification did you get? And is it the one that you use every day now?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I did AAT and then I did ACCA.
So they're accounting qualifications, yeah?
Both accounting qualifications, yeah. And I think they're probably quite similar now. I mean, it's been a few years since I qualified, but I do think they're changing slightly to be a bit more digital focused. When I did them, they weren't. They were still, like, let's draw a T account and work this out. Whereas now, like, I don't even know if they touch on T accounts at all. But I think more and more as I sort of go through my journey, I do consider what qualifications I would have done if I'd done it all again, or if I'm going to do a bit more training on more technology-based stuff.
That's really interesting. I mean, I've been on a similar journey in some respects. So when I went to university, my eldest son's going to university this year. I went to do an oceanography degree. That's because it sort of covered off the topics that I liked at A level. Looking back, I should have gone and done a law degree, but I just had no concept of what a law degree was. So I've kind of got to where I've got to, and I don't know if I'd have done that if I had gone straight in with that law degree. But it's interesting the kind of like knowledge that you get now. That's why I was interested if you're still using it on a daily basis, or you're still using the accountancy bit regularly, especially when you made that distinction earlier between finance and accounting.
And I was talking to someone the other day, actually, and they were saying it's so weird because it's probably the only profession that to call yourself an accountant and, to do that sort of career path, you have to do those qualifications. Whereas there are so many other professions where you can get there without having those exact qualifications. Whereas for us, like, even if you're recruiting a finance director now, I think it would be extremely relevant to have some sort of technology degree or qualification, or, some wider economics information around it. But it's always, have you done, your ACA or ACCA or whatever? And it's like, do we need that? I mean, it's very relevant, but we don't need it, I don't think. But it's the only profession where it's literally first thing on the job spec. Are you a qualified accountant?
I think that's one of the hottest questions at the moment, actually. It's like, are the qualifications that you get great for work, fit for work, getting you ready for work? Because I think in the past it was seen as a qualification to set you apart, to give you a set of professional ethics, to single you out as possibly the best of the best. There was prestige around it. But I think now we're in a sort of skills-based economy. And, if I'm a CEO and I'm looking for a CFO, yes, I want you to be competent in that area of financial management and understand what's going on. But I'm probably looking for other things as well. And, you mentioned technology there, you mentioned economics, you're a good communicator. It sounds like you network a lot as well. So, all these things are relevant. The Americans kind of call them rock star CFOs, and I just don't really go with that. But I kind of get the message, which is we're business leaders now. Yeah, we're not bean counters. We haven't been for a long time.
Just picking on that, there's something interesting in there that's going off in my head around that we've got to the point we're discussing our careers, right? So we each of us on this have got some experience, and actually what we do is we translate our experience into the workplace. That's kind of it. The question is, what are the foundations that are needed, including qualifications, to give new entrants a fast track to the level of experience that we've got, that they don't just have to get older, And I think that's almost the question: do the qualifications give the level of experience, or is it almost getting qualified? It's like your driving test. Is it like your driving test where you pass your qualification and then you start learning?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot in that. Yeah, I don't know what the answer is, because I think the experience levels now that people need are so diverse, because you do have businesses that are very led by tech, and the decision making is very fast and they're agile and they're moving constantly. And then you have businesses that are still fairly old fashioned, and they don't really want to rely on tech. Maybe they don't quite trust it, and they certainly aren't going to make fast decisions based on it. So those two different people going into those two different organizations will naturally be quite different. So we're maybe at this sort of weird time point where things are changing, but not completely.
I think there was also an assumption in the past that there was a career ladder and there was time to go up that ladder. And it's very structured in the accounting and finance world. But that career ladder, there's a lot of discussion about whether that career ladder is being eroded by, AI and technology and efficiency, and whether the the entry levels are going to be there in the future, because data entry is being replaced by tech and AI, and therefore, where is the breeding ground for these people? So I think the reason for the questioning on the qualification side, which is what you're talking about there, Mike, is almost because we have to get people ready for a different starting point in the workplace. And in the past, it was like, oh, don't worry, just start and we'll do some CPD, some continuous development. We'll give you some experience over 3-5 years and you'll get there. But now it's like, oh, actually, I don't have anywhere to learn, or I have less opportunity to learn in these entry level jobs. So I need to start higher up.
And just sort of thinking on that, there's so many fractional or gig roles now where people are like doing really short-term contracts, coming in to do something and going, that you don't get that kind of on-the-job training in the same way. So yeah, I agree.
So just shifting focus a little bit, Becky, you talking about you, and you touched on your sort of business, your side gig, and all the rest of it. What drives you? What's the reason you get up out of bed every morning? And it might be wine. That's it's a leading statement, but tell me more.
Well, I'm definitely not thinking about wine as soon as I wake up, thankfully. Certainly not drinking it anyway. Yeah, I think the power of doing something a little bit different and having that sort of control over your own, destiny, or whatever you want to call it, like whatever your North Star is. If you have control to get there, then I think that's a real driving force. So yeah, we set up the company really because it's wine, right? And we enjoyed drinking wine. So there was that. But also because we wanted to learn. And I have learned so much in the past few years of running that business, not just, in finance and running that, and even in tech, but in sort of discipline, in negotiation, in just figuring stuff out on your own, which I think is a skill in itself, because if you're working in a larger organization, there's always someone else to ask, or someone else to take the blame, maybe. You can say, oh, it wasn't my decision, it was them. So yeah, that's sort of the main thing that's come out of that business, is the fact that I've learned so much. And drinking the great wine is amazing, and meeting other people is also amazing. And I think, yeah, it's just trying to give a voice and a platform to smaller businesses as well, which is really sort of wholesome, and it just feels great. So yeah, it's just been fun.
So I've got 2 questions related to what you just said, and it's what's the business called? And you didn't actually say what it did. It just sounds like you spend the time quaffing wine. So what's the business called, and what's it actually do?
If I could get paid for quaffing wine all day, that would be brilliant. So it's called Elizabeth Rose Wines. It's an online wine merchant. So basically, we buy wines directly from the vineyard and we sell it to consumers and to restaurants and places like that. So yeah, we absolutely love it. It's been such a learning curve, but yeah, I would now say to people, if you have an interest in something and you think like, well, can we make a go of that? Like, just go for it, because it would teach you so much. And I don't think I've really understood how much I would learn. It was like, oh yeah, I'll learn from this, but not this much. It definitely helped me make a bit of a step change in my own career as well.
I love that. I think it's so
Sorry.
brave to kind of just spend time doing something like that, and to consciously go into something that is a bit of a learning project by the sounds of it, I think is such a smart move. You know, what are the skills that you've added to your CV?
Negotiation, I would say, is something that I didn't really have to do before. Obviously, you're negotiating with other people in your business because, you know, you all think your project or your department is the most important thing. And so, you know, you're all fighting for the time at the board table or whatever. But yeah, a lot of vineyard owners in this country, because we do just specialize in English and Welsh wines, are basically farmers that are diversifying. So one thing for us has had to have been something that it works for both parties. And I know that's basic and it has to be like that in all business. But when you're a small business yourself and you're buying from a small business, it even more so has to kind of fit with both of you. And then, as I touched on before, we had to make it work with the technology coming in and making it easier for both of us, because we did both work full time. So it was kind of like a necessary. We had to find some technology to automate. And yeah, it kind of just worked.
I know that. I mean, that's fantastic, and it's as Chris said, it's really great to hear that you've done that as a side hustle effectively, and it's become successful. I've got kind of a final question for you, and it links back to something in your introduction. So Chris introduced you as an award winner. So can you tell us a little bit about the awards that you've won, what they were for?
Yeah, so in 2023, I won 3 awards. First one was...
So the intro should have been multiple award winning.
Oh God, I've been short sold.
Sorry, I'll edit that.
How dare you? Yeah. Yeah, so top 50 women in accounting, and that was like a global thing. The next one I won was at the Jennies, the Digital Finance Function Awards, which
Thank
was
you. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, Social Media of the Year, which was amazing. Which always happens to be held on like the hottest night in London of the year for some reason, and I just have to rehydrate.
That's why we do it. We're trying to create this fiesta festival environment.
Yeah, it works. And then the final one that I won was the Finance Director of the Year, and that was at the Accounting Excellence Awards. So yeah, it was a busy year, 2023.
Sounds amazing. And again, thanks for the plug. Thanks for the plug. And it's helpful to get onto people's radar in this way, right? Have you seen any benefits to kind of winning awards like that?
Yeah, I think people just find you a little bit more interesting. They might invite you to things. So I've been invited to events, I'm sure, not because they, you know, specifically want my company, but just because they think, oh, you must be interesting, let's invite you, which is really nice, because I do really believe that businesses are just people and people doing the same thing, and they happen to be in a business together and driving forward towards a goal. So yeah, meeting new people, understanding where they're coming from. And I do think the way in which people learn the most, especially from like a senior finance or business professional point of view, is from each other, because there is sort of no judgment, bouncing ideas around, and it's a lot of the time it's those conversations over a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, or a Gen CFO mastermind that can just get the cogs turning and just sort of level you up a little bit. So yeah, it's been really good fun.
Other professional communities exist as well, obviously.
Do they?
But yeah, of course they do. Of course they do. No, you're part of a brilliant. I think it's a women's community, Nova. And there are lots of other. The institutions run their events, but they're not quite the same as these more kind of professional, personal focused events.
Yeah, and I think joining that is really important, because it can be a little bit daunting or lonely, as they say, in those sort of senior positions when you're the one that's making the decisions. Instead of waking up at midnight in a cold sweat, if you've talked that out with someone that's also going through it, it might just make those decisions a little bit easier.
That is brilliant. And that is a incredible segue into the question that we have today, because each podcast we like to ask a question, and if you are interested in asking, send your questions to podcast@generationcfo.com or reach out to myself and Mike via LinkedIn. The question this week, which does come from the community, and I actually think it came via our community success manager who's responsible for all of our exec members. It was a question, but a statement as well, which was, I'm an introvert and hate networking. So what can I do? And I think it was around, we tend to invite people into our masterminds or into our meetups first before they sign up, which I think is only fair. But if you're an introvert and you might see the value of networking, but you kind of hate it, like what can we do? Mike, I'll come to you first because you're nodding away.
Because I'm an introvert and I hate networking, and that's the truth. That's the absolute truth.
Did you submit this question?
I mean, I could have done. It's absolutely so. Genuinely, it's something I've had to navigate through my career. Is how do I network? Because I know you need to network to get on, but absolutely hate it. And you'll have witnessed some of the tactics that I've learned over time, Chris. Which is, I'm always at events. If there's an event going on, I'm always there first, or one of the first to be there, because I can work out what the lay of the land is. I can try and manage the environment for me that suits me, because I really hate walking into rooms of lots of people where I don't know anybody. The other thing I often do is if I'm not presenting, I'll find someone to tag along with and utilize their networking skills. Another learned behavior. But the real trick, I think, for an introvert, especially somebody like me that's got something to say, is to present. It's to get involved in the panels, get involved in the discussions, put your hand up and speak. Really hard to do, but actually then people will come. If you say something interesting, people will then come and talk to you. And you don't have to go through that kind of horrible bit of, hi, my name's Mike. Yeah, I do intellectual property rights. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means this. And that's the bit that I hate. The too long don't read of what I just said is be really deliberate about your networking and think about tactics that work for you and utilize them. Don't just think because other people are vivacious and off that you can be it.
That's interesting. And you sort of say that I might have seen some of those tactics, and I have, but I haven't recognized them actually, which is, I think, important too. It's just, you're doing your own thing. Just on that last one though, it's almost like I'm presenting for people to come to me because I don't like the wordy introduction. But you also have an introduction that you use quite a lot, which I really like, and we've joked about in the past, which is, hi, my name's Mike. I'm not an accountant, right? Normally at our events. So I think, does that work as well?
Community. It does, but if you actually think about the Gen CFO events now, I've been to a few, so actually it's more of a comfortable environment now. The absolute 100% worst is if you're going to something like there's one coming up called State of Open Data Conference, so it's coming up at the QE2 Exhibition Centre, and I know already I'm not going to go because there'd be no point, because I would go and I would hate it and I'd leave. So actually so the jokey introduction is when I'm happy being at the event and I've got that kind of in now. That's fine. It's bizarre. So I appreciate the question because it's almost a physical thing. Of just like,
it's quite contradictory for me to hear it as well, because I'm more of an extrovert. I'm quite happy to get there. I do have my moments, like being completely honest.
We all do.
I get social anxiety over certain things as well, but I am able to shake it off. But the getting there early, actually, to me as an extrovert, sounds a bit contradictory, because it's like getting there early means that you are the center of attention. I would have thought that you'd get there when it's busy so you can slip in.
And I can pick off. So if I'm there early, I can pick off the first person there to speak to. So I don't have to go into a room of 10 people and find somebody. The next person in I can speak to, or the organizer who's keen is there I can speak to. So actually you've got over the hurdle of starting a conversation when it's one-on-one, not one to many.
That's brilliant.
And to be clear, this is stuff that I've found works for me. It won't work for everybody, and it's just anyway. Sorry, you can see this question's tapped into something that I've thought about a lot, right?
Yeah, but I think it's super relevant. Becky, how about you? You do a lot of networking. Where are you on the spectrum?
Do you know, I don't know, because I do really like networking. I love being around other people and learning from them. But I definitely then have a point where I'm like, I have nothing more to give. Like my brain has shut down. My words make no sense anymore. I can't really listen to people. All I want to do is go home and watch really bad TV in a dark room and just sort of like chill. So I don't know where I am, but I definitely have a line that I'm done, and it comes quite quickly. Actually, I'm like in full flow, and then I'm like, no, I'm gonna have to leave. Like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. Like trying to walk into a room, a busy room, and there's like groups of people already talking to each other, and you're there on your own, and you have to almost like interrupt one of those groups and say, hi, stop talking what you're talking about. Let's talk to me now. It just feels really awkward and wrong. So yeah, I think it's just a skill that I've learned over time, and that doesn't mean that I haven't been that really awkward person that's absolutely like wanted to crawl into a dark hole because no one wants to talk to you or whatever. But yeah, now I find it quite easy, but I think that's just because I've gone through the pain. Yeah,
it's interesting to hear. Alex, we spoke to Alex, who's a presenter, Alex Bombonnet, in a few episodes ago, and she's on the conference scene. She does a lot of facilitation, a lot of speaking, and I assumed she was an extrovert, and she said the same thing. She said, you know what, when I go to like big conferences, I actually need to go back to my hotel room and lie down for a bit,
yeah.
just to recharge. And obviously introvert extrovert is more about where you get your energy from rather than whether you can be with lots of people or not. But it's nice to hear this actually, because we've tried to address this with what we do, with having a reception area so that people are clear when they come to us, that they get a welcome rather than they have to sort of slip in by themselves. And also with the partnering up with people, we tried to create event groups on our online community so that people can actually see and connect and try and meet up beforehand or find out whether they're there. Now people are still pretty backward at coming forward, but at least there's an opportunity to do that, which I think is helpful.
I've just got one and a half final thing. So somebody said something interesting to me a few weeks ago, somebody who knows me well said, give yourself a target, one target for a networking event. If that's go up and speak to one person about something, just do that. So almost once you've done that, then you've succeeded. I know. So actually then everything else is a bonus on top of that, or if you go at that point, fine. And then the other final point is, to your point around where you get your energy from, is not everybody's the same. So if you feel that you're done, do what Becky does and go. If you're done, you're done. That's fine. And that's fine. Everybody doesn't have to be the vivacious kind of center of attention.
Yes. And that's not a dig at me, is it? Being the vivacious center of attention.
No, Chris. No, Chris.
No, it's funny, the psychology around it, because Becky, you sort of say that when you use the word interrupt a group and everyone now talk to me, like I naturally never.
You do that all the time. Yeah.
No, but when I see a group of people, I just think, let's go and talk to them, and let's see what they're talking about. And yeah, it's just interesting how you sort of view these situations differently, and we can definitely do more to help people, which I think is important. Good stuff. Sounds great. And yeah, we'll come back for a special on that. So moving on to our good data, bad data. This is kind of like, Becky, we were talking beforehand about some of the interesting stats from LinkedIn.
Yeah, it seems to be a bit of a gap, doesn't there? So there was some stats out saying, so LinkedIn jobs that mention AI or Gen AI have more than doubled. But there was like 67% of UK professionals that say we have never had any formal training or even guidance on this. So it's like, okay, now there's this huge gap then between obviously businesses that want someone that knows what they're doing in this area, and people that actually maybe feel confident or even trained to do that. So where is this gap going to be filled from? And is it our responsibility as individuals to go out and get that training? Or should we be looking to our employer to upskill the workforce and make sure their workforce is capable of doing that? Like, where is that gap going to come from?
It's a great unknown.
But so I agree with the great unknown. I think that the key bit is to be calling it out, and I think that this conversation is starting to call out that gap. I mean, we've talked about is AI the new kind of shiny thing that everyone's looking at? To some extent, it is, but people need to know that they need to know a bit more to be able to make that statement, right? So I think that calling it out within a business organization, we need to know more about this, and then finding a solution to that, be it online training, getting somebody in, recruiting a new member of staff, whatever it might be. The first thing is, let's identify the problem or the gap that we've got.
Knowing the problem shared is a problem halved and all that. So it's interesting, because I do think, we spoke to trailblazing AI expert Nina Sheik a couple of weeks ago, and I asked her the question at the end, which was, will we stop talking about AI soon because everyone will just understand it, and they'll understand the difference, and they'll understand what it means and the nuance, and then it just becomes part of our language? And she said, yeah, most likely. So I just wonder whether this is like a bit of a poor HR response to the need for digital skills. They're like, oh God, I don't really know what we need from people, so I'll just add in AI or add in Gen AI. It seems like it's a complete Wild West in terms of recruitment at the moment in that area.
I think for me, as somebody that's worked in digital and data transformation for far too many years, what's really good about the Wild West scenario is it's giving people a language to understand the need for digital and data literacy. Because the AIs, the Gen AIs, the bots are much more accessible. People are starting to see, oh, okay, so if we put rubbish data into something, we get these hallucinated answers, or we get bad outputs, which you can then turn into a message around digital and data literacy, which up until now has been largely a very boring conversation that people aren't interested in. So I think, whilst I agree with Nina's comment that we won't be talking about it, I think it will continue to be a driver for better digital and data literacy.
Yeah, sounds good. And that was on the good data side, because just highlighting the gap actually is good data. Mike, you had something on Apple's green journey.
So that came up this morning, actually, in the workshop that I've been at today. Somebody said, oh, Apple are doing really well on their environmental stuff, but they don't shout about it. So they're not greenwashing. They don't go wild about their environmental credentials. But some of their products are now 100% recycled or 100% carbon neutral. So some things, the components in most, there's like 20% recycled components in most of their gadgets now. But actually, their journey to being net zero by 2030 is that they've been carbon neutral since 2020. And they've reduced their emissions by 45% since 2015. And I just thought, actually, that's quite a significant, for a company that size, that's quite a significant step. And that reduction in emissions is across all of their owned sites. So their aim is to be 100% carbon neutral by 2030. Sorry, 100. So all their sites have reduced emissions by 2030. But then they start working on their supply chain. So they're working with their supply chain to start reducing their emissions as well. So just wanted to share that. It came out this morning.
That is good data. It's interesting that they don't chat about that, if that is true, because it's the complete opposite to what's happening in the world. Greenwashing and having to legislate against big corp actually trying to sort of take that message out, and it all being complete rubbish. Yeah, interesting. And Becky, on your side, do you touch on anything ESG wise?
Yeah, I think it's one of the many sort of extra roles that FDs, CFOs, accountants have to think about now. And actually, I was talking to someone the other day who was saying that they're working on a piece of software that as well as, you drop your invoice in and it automatically reads that it's 100 pens or, and then we're going to code it to whatever. It will also then automatically pick up the carbon footprint of that product. And then it will be able to give you, you can press a button and it will give you this nice carbon report. So it's really easy then to embed that sort of environmental side into your accounting software. So I thought that was fascinating. I've not seen anything that sort of works on an SME type level yet, but I'm sure it's going to come, because at some point we're all going to have to start reporting on it, and the bad guys are going to be pulled out pretty quickly, I think.
I'd love to learn more about tech in that space, because there is a concern from a lot of people in our space that we're going to start creating an overhead of ESG reporting, and we're going to need someone to come in and for half of their time, create ESG reports, because it's not just a one-off thing. You have to be, creating these reports on a regular basis, and also getting the data on a daily basis. Like you said, it's that data capture, which is the real work, the data management. So anyway, but it's all good. It's a really good use case as well, by the sounds of it, making life easier for SMEs. Just moving on to the bad data. So this is crazy, and this is a bit wider than the normal conversation that we normally have. But I came across this post, and I believe it to be true, so I'm going to just talk about it anyway. But I came across this post where restaurants were using dating apps to get people to go to dates in their restaurant, and they were made up dates. So then the person who's in the restaurant would eat. And it just seemed bonkers that people were using kind of this technology and data in this way to basically drive a little bit of revenue to their restaurant.
I don't know. Is that normal? I'm not sure. Is that a good use of data? Again, I'm not sure. It seems pretty thinking outside the box, doesn't it? So I wonder who came up with it in that company.
I'm incredulous a little bit, but it's almost like a physical manifestation of phishing, right? It's that, send somebody an email and they'll send you some money. This is like the next level, which is we'll send you a request to meet. You'll come along and spend some money anyway. Very clever, brilliant. Entrepreneurs everywhere.
Entrepreneurial, but they'll never return to that restaurant because it will have bad vibes for them. So, it's a short-term fix. And as we all know in business, you need to look a little bit further than that. Thank you for all of your input today. That's been really interesting. Covered a lot there. Entrepreneurship, skills, introversion, all sorts. So, Becky, thank you very much for being with us today. And we have one shout out before we go. Becky, you might actually know Val. Have you met Val Elliott?
I know Val. Yeah, love Val.
Well, I'm pleased to give her a shout out this week, because Val is now the UK FD of Lavazza Coffee. Yeah. And someone has added to my show notes, free coffee for the pod, ?
That will have been me. Yes. Well, of course, that's it's the obvious next question after a shout out like that, right?
Well, it's funny you say that, because before each mastermind, because they're at 8 o'clock in the morning, we send out coffees to everyone. So maybe there's a tie-in there with Val. Yeah. I will sort that one out. But anyway, look, congrats to Val. Looks like a great move and a great company. So that's really good to hear. Look forward to catching up with her next time we meet. And again, thank you to Becky.
Thank you.
Thank you from Mike.
Thank you very much.
And remember, it's not all about the numbers.